Does this seem at all familiar to you, perhaps?
Hi there.
What the fuck?
You forgot
ready.
the balaclava.
What is that?
I didn't have one. I didn't
What
have one.
is this?
What is that?
It's a
Buy
homeless
one.
guy.
Buy
It
the
is a
balaclava.
homeless guy. There's a lot of poor people in Tarkov, and despite that fact, in all honesty, making money in Tarkov is not that hard. I promise you that. You've probably heard that like 1,000 times, and then you go to do whatever money run you've been told about. It doesn't work, you die, you get frustrated, and you feel like you wasted your time. Now, granted, of course, losing money is just as easy, if not arguably far easier than making it, but I digress. Seeing as I got a singular DM a few days ago from somebody that was asking, Eclipse, how do I not be poor? I've put together a simple 3-step guide on how to avoid becoming poor in Escape from Tarkov. Step number 1, Scav on reserve. Now, if you ask most people, they'll tell you that streets or lighthouse are the big paydays when it comes to using your scav. But the problem with those maps is that their mortality rates are ungodly high. Lighthouse and streets have a tendency of spawning you very early into raids, and in those raids where you're super early, your deaths to PMCs are a fairly often occurrence. And when it comes to Lighthouse, which is one of those maps that a ton of people scav on, the actual amount of places that you can get loot and there's points of interest that have good loot at them are considerably low compared to how big the map is. And because of that, people get funneled towards the rogue camp and, well, you guessed it, now you're trying to fight these cracked out AIs with your shitty scav guns, and that's not gonna work for most people. Point is, go to reserve. This map is absolutely loaded with garbage, and in Tarkov, garbage is where the money's at. Generally speaking, depending on where you spawn, you're either gonna wanna hit either of the night buildings, either of the pawn buildings, or the queen building. For the most part, I'd avoid the K buildings, the train station, and the underground part of the map. These places can have raiders in them, these places can have PMCs in them, they're generally pretty dangerous, and you just don't want to be getting killed. That's the big thing here, don't get killed. Now, of course, equally important to where you go is what you actually end up picking up. This is going to vary a little bit depending on whether or not you have the flea market, but generally speaking, the rules remain the same. The most important is honestly more of what you don't want to be picking up, more so than what you do. Generally speaking, cleaning supplies, weapon attachments that are not either multi-zoom scopes or suppressors, cigarettes, as well as lighters and matches are things that you just want to completely avoid picking up because they're worth next to nothing. Picking up pretty much anything else is probably going to end up being worthwhile. There are a few outliers and you'll just figure those out as you play and figure out what you want to pick up and what you don't. Now, once you've looted one of these buildings, your inventory's full and it's time to leave. Even if you feel like the loot that you've picked up is subpar or your inventory's full of garbage, it doesn't matter. It's time to extract. I think biting off more than you can chew is probably the biggest pitfall for a lot of newer players, and it goes doubly so when you're a scav, because when you're a scav, it's a free kit, so it doesn't matter quite as much if you die, right? Wrong. If you die, you've gone into the raid, you've wasted your time, and you've made nothing. So it's much better to extract with some garbage and make some money than make nothing and die. My general rule of thumb is if it feels like it might be time to go, it probably already was 5 minutes ago, and it's definitely time to go. Just for a bit of a point of reference, I did 2 quick scav runs for the sake of this video. The first one was really good. If I sold everything directly to fence, I would have made about 450,000 rubles. Now I have the flea market, and obviously selling directly to fence is kind of a questionable idea, so I didn't do that, and after selling everything on the flea market, I made over 800,000 rubles. The second raid wasn't quite as good, would have made 310,000 rubles selling directly to fence, and I ended up with about 560,000 give or take. But the thing you have to consider is that that's over 1 million rubles from 2 raids, and each of those raids took under 10 minutes. Last thing to note on reserve, and just generally with scavs in general, and that's if you hear gunshots, just go the other way. Above all else, what matters is that you survive and extract from the raid. Step number 2, gear fear. Every other Tarkov creator on the planet is going to tell you that you should discard your gear fear as soon as possible and go in with whatever the best equipment is that you have. I'm here to tell you that I disagree with all of those people. While yes, myself, as someone who has over 3,000 hours, has played this game far too much, I've long since discarded most of my gear fear. I end up running ridiculously expensive kits and thermals and stuff like that, oftentimes probably more than I should. But the thing is, again, I have 3,000 hours of experience. I know pretty much all of the maps and how most of them function, on top of having a bunch of money, so I can afford to spend stupid amounts of money on dumb shit. As a lower skilled player, having a healthy amount of gear fear and being careful with what you do and don't bring into the raid, I think is actually a really good thing and is going to help you avoid going broke. The thing is, because you're either new or not quite as good at the game, a lot of your encounters with other players and a lot of your deaths are going to be something that you either couldn't really have avoided or couldn't have reacted to, regardless of what gear you had with you. And so in those situations, if you're bringing a bunch of expensive stuff and then you're dying, well, it was pointless to bring the expensive stuff to begin with. Now granted, when I talk about gear fear, I am not talking about the people who take their stuff and they put the really good stuff at the bottom of their stash and they'll go, well, I'll use it on a good day, and then never use it. That is not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is liquidating your higher end gear in order to make sure that you can afford more kits of a lower end variety, and hence you don't go broke and can play more raids. Here's an example for you. If you go into a raid and you kill somebody or you find a U-Lock helmet in a box, if you want to sell it, you can sell it to Ragman for about 56,000 rubles. Those 56,000 rubles can buy you 2 P.A.K.A. Class 2 armors or 1 Kirasa armor with Class 3 plates in it. When you're weighing your options, it is far more likely that you're going to get your money's worth out of the P.A.K.A. armors or the Kirasa than you ever would have out of that U-Lock. If you get into an ill-fated Scav encounter that you didn't see coming, and the P.A.K.A. protects you from a shot, or the Kirasa blocks the shot entirely, that's going to be a hell of a lot better than if somebody's shooting at you and they happen to hit your helmet with bad ammo and it blocks the shot. That just isn't very likely, and it's far more likely with the Scav encounters, so at the end of the day, like I said, if you're weighing your options, it's much better to sell the higher end gear so that way you can afford to run more kits with lower end gear. Step number 3, gearing up your PMC. Gearing up for PMC runs is a very daunting task for new players, and I promise you it's a lot easier than it looks, and hopefully I can help you out with that. Our first stop is going to be your secure container, which is arguably one of the most important things on here. I'm going to be running off the assumption that most people that are watching this and need help are probably running the alpha container, the 2x2, and have the standard edition. If you are one of these people, what I would put in the secure container is one of the 1-slot healing items, so either an IFAK, an AFAK, maybe a piece of cheese if you're really poor, an aluminum splint, painkillers, as well as a hemostatic applicator if you have one, and if not, then you can use one of the S-marches. Now, you'll probably be picking up on the fact that your secure container is entirely filled with meds. There's a good reason for this. And that's that as a newer or lower skilled player, you're not going to be using meds nearly as much as other people because, as I said in an earlier step, a lot of your deaths are going to be people you don't see or just instant one-taps. And if that's the case, and you're constantly bringing healing items that are not in your container in your character, and then you have to buy them, that's one more thing you have to buy every single time. And because it's not like armor or any of those other things where it can't go in the container because, well, you need to wear it, it's pretty much a no-brainer to put meds in your container. And of course, if you find items that are pretty valuable, you can just swap them out as you go in the raid. Now, onto your character. I'm going to give you what I basically consider as the current early game loadout for Tarkov. What you're going to want is a P.A.K.A. armor, teabag, and bank robber vest from Ragman, the M32 headset from Skier, and the AKS-74UN with the Cobra dovetail sight and 3 magazines from Prapor. This loadout is pretty much the best bang for your buck early on. as it gives you a backpack and a rig for loot that you can swap out if you kill someone, a headset so that you can actually, hear things, because headsets in this game are very important, even if the M32s aren't quite as good as everything else. Lower level armor, which won't protect you from players, but should stop scavs from one-shotting you from far too far away with shotguns and other nonsense. And most of all, a fully automatic weapon with controllable recoil, and the biggest of all of those, a sight, because trying to use irons in this game is easier said than done. All of this, and it comes out to roughly 130,000 rubles for the entire kit. Not only that, but because the gear is mostly useless to a lot of players playing the game now, or at any point past immediate early wipe, basically nobody is taking this stuff. Nobody wants a bank robber vest, nobody wants a teabag, nobody wants the crappy M32 headsets, nobody wants your AK-74U with barely anything on it, so generally speaking, they're just going to ignore them, not take them, and if you've insured them, you're going to get them back in insurance and you can run the kit again the next day for a fraction of what you just paid for it. If we're looking at it directly from my perspective, if we combined the scav runs from earlier that I did with the runs that I'm doing right now, I can run this loadout 8 or 9 times in a row, die in every single one of those raids, and I'm still going to be in the black. And that's of course assuming that you die in every single one of the raids, which hopefully you're not doing, but if you are, then, well, that's the point of this loadout. It's cheap, you can die with it, no biggie, and it's not a whole lot of skin off your back if you do. And assuming that you don't die 5 minutes into the raid, it should be very easy to loop your scav with a few PMC runs and make sure that you just never run out of money. Is it impossible? No, of course not. You could get unlucky on the scav, you could get really unlucky on all of your PMC runs, just have a really bad day of Tarkov and go negative. It's possible, but it's also not super likely. And well, I guess that's kind of it. I've certainly got more advice for new players, but a lot of that advice is stuff that I'm sure you've either heard in other guides or is just not relevant to the video at hand. I also didn't want this video to go on and on forever, so I'm gonna be cutting things off here. Generally speaking, I'm not here to tell you how to play, more so to just avoid going broke. If you have anything to say about my methods or how you feel about the way I portrayed my information, feel free to let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video and you got something out of it, then you can leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, of course, don't do any of those things. And with that, I'm done here. So have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys on the next one.